400 years from the time of Joshua, the Israelites could not conquer, could not defeat the Canaanites of Jerusalem. 400 years from the time of Joshua to the time of King David. And there were two reasons why the Israelites could not conquer Jerusalem. First, the walls, the huge walls surrounding the city. And second, the spring, which gave Jerusalem a lot of water. This system, this tunnel, was used by the Canaanites for times of war. In times of war, they did not have to go out of the walls. The spring was outside of the walls. They did not have to go outside of the walls. They used this tunnel, which went under the city and under the walls and went to a pool from which they took water back into the city. And that's why the city was not conquered for 400 years. The Canaanite tribe that lived here was called Yevusi. Now King David, he came to Jerusalem after he became a king. He came to Jerusalem because Jerusalem was supposed to be the city of the temple. And he watched the walls, the huge walls, and he understood that it is impossible to conquer the city through the walls. Here we can see the Canaanite walls of Jerusalem. This is what remained of these walls after almost 4,000 years, after the destruction of the first temple, the destruction of the second temple, all the earthquakes that happened in the last 3,000 or 4,000 years. And even after all these, we can see these huge walls that protected the Canaanite city of Jerusalem. It was impossible to conquer Jerusalem through these walls. And if we take into consideration the water tunnel, the project of the Canaanites that brought the water into the city, so they had the walls, they had water, so they could protect their city for a period of 400 years. The Israelites, Bnei Israel, could not conquer Jerusalem until the time of King David, but he understood that the only entrance through which he could get into the city and defeat the city was this system, the water system, the tunnel. But the Canaanites understood the problem of this tunnel. And in order to prevent soldiers from coming through the tunnel, they had a very unique trick. What was the trick of the Canaanites? Let us read the Bible, the story about David coming to Jerusalem. And King David and his men went to Jerusalem, to the Yevusi, the Canaanites of Jerusalem, the inhabitants of the land. And they, the Canaanites, spoke to David, saying, unless thou remove even the blind and the lame, thou shalt not come in here into the city. The blind and the lame. And again, in the next verse, the Bible mentions the blind and the lame. That David, when he conquered Jerusalem, he defeated the blind and the lame. Again and again, the Bible speaks about the blind and the lame. What was the role, the task of the blind in the defense of Jerusalem? It appears here in the Bible, Samuel 2, chapter 5. It appears here that the blind and the lame were the strongest power that protected the city. We know that both of them are very limited. The blind cannot see, the lame cannot walk. What was the role of the blind and the lame? Let us first talk about the blind. Look in this tunnel. You can see in this tunnel, you can see holes in the sides of the tunnel, in the walls of the tunnel, you can see holes. What is the purpose of these holes? The purpose of these holes is probably a place for the soldiers. The Canaanites were aware of the possibility that the enemies, especially David, would come through the tunnel. So they stationed here in these holes, in these chambers, on both sides of the tunnel, they stationed soldiers. But what's the problem of the soldiers? The problem of the soldiers, most of the soldiers are tired all the time. They fall asleep. And when they fall asleep, especially that it is dark in this tunnel, especially at night when people don't walk here. So when it is dark, they fall asleep, and the soldiers of the enemy can go through the tunnel and enter the city. In order to prevent that possibility, they stationed here not only soldiers, but blind people. Blind people are not sensitive to the darkness. They can sit here for hours because they live in a world of darkness. But they have natural advantage, and their natural advantage is that they have absolute hearing. They are very sensitive in their hearing. So they can discover any enemy, any soldier coming through the tunnel. And that's why the Jebusites, the Canaanites, were so confident that David couldn't come through the tunnel, because they were confident that any attempt to enter the city through the tunnel would be stopped by the blind, because they would hear the soldiers creeping through the tunnel with their sensitive ears and awake the soldiers, and the soldiers would stop the soldiers of the enemy. So this is the task of the blind here. And the blind who sat here with the soldiers gave the Canaanites such a confidence that nobody could enter this tunnel, that they mocked and laughed at King David and told him it is impossible to go through the tunnel. Probably they knew that he found the entrance to this tunnel. They were not anxious about it. They were not worried about it, because the blind sat here, and the blind gave with their wonderful ears, they gave him the confidence that any attempt would be stopped. And here comes Joab, the hero, the chief of staff of King David. He did it by himself. He succeeded to go through this tunnel quietly, without being discovered, even by the blind. It is really very hard to understand how he did it. Probably he did it alone, because the more people you bring into the tunnel, there is a greater chance that they would make noise and they would be discovered and revealed. So Joab, get into the city, go quietly to the gates of the city, open them, and then all the soldiers of David who stood outside of the gates, they could enter the city and conquer probably in a few minutes. They could conquer the city, because the city was surprised. They didn't expect any attack from the gates, because they were sure that nobody could enter the city through the gates. We read about the conquest of Jerusalem by King David, not only in the book of Samuel, but also in the book of Chronicles. In the book of Chronicles, the first book, chapter 11, verse 4, we read the following passage. And David and all Israel went to Jerusalem, which is Yevus. This was the Canaanite name of Jerusalem, where the Yevusi were, the inhabitants of the land. And the inhabitants of Yevus said to David, "Thou shalt not come here." We know that they were so confident about their ability to protect the city because of their walls, huge walls. And besides, they had also the system of the blind and the lame. And now we have a verse which gives us more details about the conquest of Jerusalem. What happened there? And David said, "Whoever smites the Yevusi, the Canaanites, first shall be chief and captain." He promised the soldier who would be able to conquer Jerusalem, he promised him to make him the chief of staff, the general of the army. So Joab, the son of Zeruiah, went first up, and he became the chief. So here we have very clearly that the Bible tells us that the one who succeeded to infiltrate into the city and conquer it was Joab. What was the source of this unbelievable heroism of Joab? We hear more about Joab in another war, the war that took place between Israel, King David, and the Ammonites. We read about that war in the second book of Samuel, chapter 10, verse 11. In that war, Joab had a problem. He was attacked from his back by the Aramites, and the Ammonites were in front. So he divided his army to two parts. One part he gave to his brother Avishai, and with the rest he fought with the Aramites. And he said to Avishai, verse 11, "If Aram proves too strong for me, then thou shalt help me. But if the children of Ammon, the Ammonites, are too strong for thee, then I will come and help thee. We shall help each other." And what is the source of his confidence that Israel would prevail? "Be of good courage, and let us be strong for our people and for the cities of our God. And the Lord do that which seems good in his eyes." Here we understand the source of the heroism of Joab. He, as King David, he was a person full of faith in God. He fought for the cities of God, for the land of Israel, which is the land of God, for the people of Israel, which is the people of God. And his success is the success of the God of Israel. With this faith, he was full of strength and power and energy and motivation. Exactly as King David, the faith of King David gave him the strength, the faith of Joab gave him the strength to conquer Jerusalem and later to conquer the whole land of Israel in the borders promised to Abraham, from the Nile in Egypt, the river of Egypt, to the Euphrates in the north. This was the great achievement of Joab, the great hero of King David, and that's why he became the chief of staff of David. And we owe Joab this wonderful gift. He gave the people of Israel the gift of Jerusalem, which became from that time which became the center, the heart of the Jewish people, the city of the temple, the holy city of the Jewish people, all based, it was given by the commitment of Joab. Think about the risk he took upon himself, because once if he were revealed or discovered in this tunnel, he would be immediately killed. He was alone. He was alone. And it was so easy to kill him. And he took upon himself that risk. And with the help of God and with his wonderful commitment to David and to God and to the people of Israel, he succeeded to conquer Jerusalem, to give it to King David, who made Jerusalem the city of the temple, the holy city of Israel. In the middle of the Canaanite pool. This pool was used in times of war, in times of siege. It was used as a water reservoir that served the city. The water of the spring usually went through a tunnel to the fields and pools outside of the city, in the valley of Kidron. But in times of war, the people of Jerusalem did not want the water to go outside of the city, so they had a way to bring the water of the spring into this pool. And the people of the city could get to this pool through the tunnel. They didn't have to go outside of the wall. They went through the tunnel, go to this place, to this pool, took water, and went back through the tunnel, back to the city. Now, what was the trick of the Canaanites in this pool? Think about a whole city going all the way down the tunnel to this pool, taking water with jars and bringing the jars back to the city. It's a lot of work. The trick the Canaanites had in this pool was to put the lame people here around the pool. The lame people could not be soldiers. They could not fight. The best way to use them was to put them around the pool and use them to fill the jars, to fill all the vessels that were brought by the people of Jerusalem, to fill these vessels with water, so that the people of Jerusalem did not have to work so hard. When they came down, they had already prepared vessels with water, prepared jars full of water, and they just had to take it and go back. Who made this job, this work, this hard work? The lame people. So in fact, the Canaanites, they took advantage of both the blind people for defense and the lame people for the supply of water to the city. That's why when King David came, the Jebusites, the Canaanites told him, "You can't defeat us because our system is based on two strong elements. One element for defense, the blind people. Anyone who would infiltrate the tunnel would be revealed. And the lame people who gave constant and good supply of water to the people of the city. The people of the city did not suffer in times of war, in times of siege." So, after King David succeeded to conquer Jerusalem, he made a rule. And the rule was, the blind and the lame shall not come into the house. What is the meaning of this rule? Is it a new law that forbade, that did not allow blind and lame to come into the temple? We don't know such a law from the Jewish halacha, from the Jewish codex. But we can explain this rule that King David made not as a new law, not as a rule that did not allow blind and lame people to enter the temple, but as a new saying. As we have explained, the blind and the lame were created a system that was almost impossible to overcome. And King David succeeded to overcome this system of the blind and the lame. So the saying means when you create a system which is beyond human ability to overcome, then you call it, this is the system of the blind and the lame. If you succeed to overcome such a system, then you have succeeded to overcome the blind and the lame. So what happened in the conquest of Jerusalem with the blind and the lame became a saying, became a proverb, became an idiom in the Hebrew language. It became a symbol of an obstacle which is impossible or beyond human ability to overcome. An obstacle which is insurmountable. You can't defeat it. The words that appear here, therefore the saying, appear in other cases in the Bible. For example, in the case of King Saul, when he got a prophecy, people wondered, and it became a saying, Hagam Shaul Baneviim. Is it possible that Saul became a prophet? So when we have these words, therefore the saying, it's not a new law, but it's a saying, it's a proverb based on a story. The same is here. The proverb about the blind and the lame is based on the story of the conquest of Jerusalem in the time of King David. And indeed, this obstacle succeeded to protect Jerusalem for a period of 400 years. Only King David could overcome, could succeeded to defeat the Canaanites, and from that time on, it became a proverb, a saying. It's really unbelievable to think of such an enterprise that was carried out almost 4,000 years ago, in the times of the patriarchs, in the time of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In that time, the Canaanites made this pool, made the tunnel, made the huge walls. It's really hard to understand why they invested such an effort to protect the city of Jerusalem. Probably it was sacred also for them. There was some kind of tradition that this site is a holy site. Maybe the spring, the economic advantage of a city near a spring that gave a lot of water to the people of the city. Maybe there were other reasons, but we know one thing for sure, that they invested both energy and thought and work to protect the city, and King David was absolutely committed to the idea that Jerusalem must be conquered. And Joab, the hero, succeeded to go through the system of the lame people, of the blind people, of all the soldiers that protected this system, went up the tunnel, went into the city, opened the gates of the city, and enabled the army of David to enter the city and conquer it and make it the capital of the Jewish people for the last 3,000 years.